leave that alone. It's dangerous. So nobody remembers anything about the feast dedication?
I'd like to give it a shot and just kind of let you guys know where I am, what I know. So from what my current understanding is that it's a celebration of a miracle that took place after the Maccabees chased whoever was in the temple out. And they only had enough oil to last for one day, but the oil lasted for 8 days. And that's kind of the bulk of, like, I know the temple was taken by some pagan people and they were like sacrificing pigs and stuff. And the Maccabees overthrew them and kicked them out. And they had some oil to rededicate the temple, but they didn't have what they thought they needed, or at least they didn't think they did.
Okay, that's fine. Would anyone else like to add into their perspective or what it is they remember?
Isn't it also called the Feast of Tabernacles?
No, that's another one. That's the one we do in the 7th month. That's the is it Shavuot?
Sukkot.
Sukkot. Thank you. That was way off. That's the Feast of Sukkot. That's Tabernacles where we dwell in the tents for a week. But it is also an 8-day feast. So you were right in that regard. Anyone else would like to add into it?
It celebrates the Maccabees' victory over the Greeks, right? When they rededicated the temple?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. 100%. Nobody else remembers anything about the Feast of Dedication? Okay, so we shall start from the beginning. We shall start from the beginning. And Celeste, we will absolutely address your comment. Yeah, we're absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 8, and we're gonna start at verse 1. Now, a little bit of a footnote or a before note. What we just went through, the last part, the last Torah portion that we just finished was about what?
The tabernacle.
Nope, not you. You can't answer. What was the last Torah portion about? Exodus 38 through 40.
It was about the temple. Moses putting the temple together, actually building it and everything.
Moses actually building the temple. Yes, you are absolutely right. Okay. So matter of fact, let's do this. Leviticus, we're going to Leviticus chapter 8, but let's start at Leviticus chapter 1 really quick. So this is the end of Exodus coming and going into the beginning of Leviticus. So Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses and spake unto him, and Yahuwah called unto Moses and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, if any man of you bring an offering unto Yahweh, ye shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd and of the flock. If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before Yahweh. Now, what's so important about this is that when we ended in Exodus chapter 40, let's go to verse 34. So Exodus chapter 40, verse 34. Moses has just finished assembling the tabernacle. He has just finished putting the tabernacle together. In verse 34, then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of Yahweh filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of Yahweh filled the tabernacle. And when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. So at this point, the temple is finished. The Most High is satisfied with the temple. He has now entered into the temple, the tabernacle of the congregation, the tent of the congregation. So he has entered into the tabernacle, and there the Most High is dwelling, and nobody, not even Moses, can come into it at this particular moment. So when we pick up in Leviticus 1, this is the Most High speaking to Moses, telling him about the offerings that are supposed to be done and offered on the altar that is within the tabernacle in the tent of congregation. Okay, now let's jump to, now as you read through the first 6, 5, the first 7 chapters, actually even after that, yeah, the next 7 chapters after Leviticus, it's the Most High describing all of the different types of offerings that the children of Israel were to offer for the priests to bring forth to the Most High. The sin offering, the peace offering, the meat offering, the drink offering, the burnt offering. He explains all of these in these 7 chapters. Now in verse 8, we get to something where the Most High changes something. And I know what we're talking about. We're talking about the Feast of Dedication, right? So Leviticus chapter 8 and verse 1. And it reads, and Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, take Aaron and his sons with him, and the garments, and the anointing oil, and a bullock for sin offering, and 2 rams, and a basket of unleavened bread, and gather thou all the congregation together unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And Moses did as Yahweh commanded him, and the assembly was gathered together unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And Moses said unto the congregation, this is the thing which Yahweh commanded to be done. So let's paint a picture. We all know that if we read through Leviticus 23, that we don't see the Feast of Dedication. We don't see Hanukkah. We don't see that listed in those feast days that the Most High proclaimed to be his holy feast. We don't see it listed at all. The first time we actually see it mentioned is in John chapter, well, in the King James, without the Apocrypha. The first time you see it is John chapter 10 and verse 22. We're going to go and get that later. But it's written throughout the Maccabees. We see it happening throughout the Maccabees. But I want to tell you, I'm going to show you something today that we've seen it before and just didn't know it. We didn't know it was called the Feast of Dedication. So here we are. This is the consecration commanded by Elohim. This is what the title is in my Bible. It has it broken down into titles, sections. So what Moses just did was he brought Aaron and his sons. He's supposed to bring them into the tent of the congregation. He's supposed to bring them into the newly built tabernacle. This is what the Most High commanded. Bring them into the temple, into the tabernacle, and we're going to consecrate them. And we're going to get them ready to do their priestly duties. Right? So we're going to go from there and we're going to go to verse 10. So Leviticus chapter 8 and verse 10. And Moses took the anointing oil and anointed the tabernacle and all that was therein, and sanctified them. And he sprinkled thereof upon the altar 7 times, and anointed the altar and all his vessels, both the laver and his foot, to sanctify them. So Moses just sanctified the tabernacle, the structure itself. He just went in and anointed it with the oil and everything. All of the pieces and all of the materials and things that were inside the tabernacle, he just anointed all of them. Now we're going to jump to verse 14. We're going to read 14 through 30. And I'm going to speed up a little bit, but I'm going to touch on a few points here. And he brought the bullock for the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the bullock for the sin offering, and he slew it. And Moses took the blood and put it upon the horns of the altar round about with his finger, and purified the altar, and poured the blood at the bottom of the altar, and sanctified it to make reconciliation upon it. Right? So we're going to see this over and over again between, and we don't have to read it. I actually made a mistake. We're not going to read all of this. That Moses anointed not only the altar, not only the tabernacle, but he also anoints Aaron and his sons with the blood of the sacrifices that he's given. Remember, when you go back through in those first 7 chapters of Leviticus, it's talking about all the different types of offerings that the children of Israel were to offer. And then the Most High explains to Moses what each one means and how to do it. And then he's telling him how to consecrate Aaron and his sons in order for them to do their job as the priests. So verses 14 through 30, this is the consecration of Aaron and his sons and the altar and the tabernacle. This is Moses literally carrying it out. He's pouring blood upon different things, sprinkling blood on different things. And then he's taking the fat and he's burning it. And he's making burnt offerings and sweet smelling savors to the Most High. So we're going to jump to verse 31. So Leviticus chapter 8 and verse 31. And it reads, and Moses said unto Aaron and to his sons, boil the flesh at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and there eat it with the bread that is in the basket of consecrations, as I commanded, saying, Aaron and his sons shall eat it, and that which remaineth of the flesh of the bread shall ye burn with fire. Here's a big clue. Verse 33. And ye shall not go out of the door of the tabernacle of the congregation in 7 days, until the days of your consecration be at an end. For 7 days shall he consecrate you. Now I want you to know something right here in verse 33, that word consecrate. If you Google it and you look up the definition of consecrate, you're going to see this word a few times throughout these verses. Consecrate, to declare or otherwise make something holy, while dedicate, because we're talking about the feast of dedication, not the feast of consecration, right? While the word dedicate means to set apart for a deity or for religious purposes, or it means to consecrate. So right here in verse 33, we see that this is the Most High consecrating Aaron and his sons for their duties. But this whole entirety is Moses consecrating the tabernacle for the use of the Most High. This is the first instance we see of the dedication of the temple, or of the tabernacle, not the temple, the tabernacle. The temple isn't until later on. We don't see that until later on. But this is the tabernacle, which is a representation. It's of the temple. It's the same thing. It's just that when Solomon comes and builds it, he makes his out of stone and out of cedar and makes it more permanent. This one is to be able to be carried around and be able to be moved, because the children of Israel were still wandering out in the wilderness. We're still moving from place to place. This one is a temporary tabernacle. It's a temporary temple. And so what we see right here is we are now dedicating the tabernacle to the Most High. Verse 34. As he hath done this day, so Yahweh hath commanded to do, to make an atonement for you. Therefore shall ye abide at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation day and night 7 days, and keep the charge of the Lord, that ye die not, for so I am commanded. So Aaron and his sons did all things which Yahweh commanded by the hand of Moses. Now I want you to see something right here. Chapter 9, verse 1. And it came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said unto Aaron, take thee a young calf for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and offer them before Yahweh. And unto the children of Israel thou shalt speak, saying, take ye a kid of the goats for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both of the first year, without blemish, for a burnt offering. Also a bullock and a ram for peace offerings, to sacrifice before Yahuwah, and a meat offering mingled with oil, for today Yahuwah will appear unto you. Right? So here it is, on the 8th day, they're going to make a sacrifice. And it's not just the priest at this time. All the children of Israel are going to bring a sacrifice unto the Most High on the 8th day. What does that sound like?
Feast of dedication.
It sounds just like the Feast of Dedication. And we're going to get into it. We're going to see this a couple times. We're going to get into it in the book of Maccabees, in 1 Maccabees chapter 4. We're going to get into it and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. But this is exactly what the Feast of Dedication is. It's 8 days of celebration, right? And before we get into it, I'm not going to give it away, but we're going to get to that. So we're going to go from here, same chapter. So Leviticus chapter 9, let's jump to verse 22. So Leviticus chapter 9, verse 22. And Aaron lifted up his hand toward the people and blessed them, and came down from offering of the sin offering and the burnt offering and peace offerings. So we see right here, Aaron he has just given the offerings unto the Most High. This is still on the 8th day. He's just given the offerings up. Verse 23. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of the congregation and came out and blessed the people. And the glory of Yahuwah appeared unto all the people. And there came a fire out from before Yahuwah and consumed upon the altar the burnt offering and the fat, which when all the people saw, they shouted and fell on their faces. So the Most High, Moses said, do this sacrifice. We're going to offer this sacrifice unto the Most High. And then the Most High is going to appear unto you. And how did the Most High appear? Through fire. He came down and he consumed all the altar. He consumed the sacrifices and the burnt offerings upon the altar. And everybody saw it, and they shouted and fell on their faces. When they fell on their faces, that's just one of the ways of saying that they fell down and they worshiped. They began to praise and worship the Most High for what he had done, for him showing himself to the children of Israel. So what we see right here is literally the Feast of Dedication. They celebrated for 8 days straight. The children of Israel, you see the priest sit at the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation for 7 days, and they feasted and they ate for 7 days straight. And then on the 8th day, they called all the congregation together to make one large sacrifice unto the Most High. And then the Most High came down and dwelt with them and showed himself to them. What are they dedicating, or what are they consecrating at this point?
Themselves.
Not themselves, not just themselves. The Most High is actually consecrating and dedicating Aaron and his sons to him. But what is Moses and the children of Israel? What are they dedicating? What are they consecrating at this point?
The tabernacle.
The tabernacle. It's the tabernacle. They're dedicating the tabernacle to the use of the Most High. So from there, let's jump to 1 Kings chapter 8. First Kings chapter 8, and we're going to go from verse 17 through 22. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 17. First Kings chapter 8 and verse 17. And it was in the heart of David, my father, to build an house for the name of Yahuwah Elohim of Israel. And Yahuwah said unto David, my father, whereas it was in thine heart to build an house unto my name, thou didst well that it was in thine heart. Nevertheless, thou shalt not build the house, but thy son that shall come forth out of thy loins, he shall build the house unto my name. And Yahuwah hath performed his word that he spake, and I am risen up in the room of David my father, and sit on the throne of Israel, as Yahuwah promised, and have built an house for the name of Yahuwah Elohim of Israel. And I have set there a place for the ark, wherein is the covenant of Yahuwah, which he made with our fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. So right now we see that Solomon has actually built the temple. At this point, the temple is built. There's a place for the ark to go. That's what Solomon is talking about, the place for the ark to dwell. This is the temple. And matter of fact, yes, we I want to do that now. All right, let's do that. Hold 1 Kings, jump to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 10, and you'll see what it is that Solomon is making mention of. So 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verses 10 through 13. Second Samuel chapter 7, verses 10 through 13. And it reads, moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them anymore as before time. Really quick, I want you guys to highlight verse 10. So whenever you get into a situation where somebody's like, well, everybody's God's people, right? We're all God's people. You can see right here that this is the Most High talking to David, and he says, my people Israel. Verse 11, and as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also Yahuwah telleth thee that he will make thee an house. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So this is the backstory which Solomon is talking about, which we see in 1 Kings 8. And if you want to, you can read even before that. No, that's not the one. That's not the correct one. And I think we get to it. It might be in 1 Chronicles, where David actually tells the Most High that he wants to build him a house, and then the Most High sends Nathan to explain to David, actually, this whole thing that we have right here, the portable or mobile tabernacle that Moses built, that they were still carrying around at that time. The Most High tells Nathan, he says, tell David that I don't have right now, I don't have a place to call my home. My home is being carried around by men, right? And he says, but there will come a time where I will give the children of Israel a place that they can call their own, where they can build a permanent structure for me. And this is that whole backstory. And that's I believe that's in 1 Chronicles. And I think I have it. But so let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 8. And we stopped at verse 21. So let's go 22. So right now, Solomon he's making it known that he has built the temple. A temple has officially been built. The Ark of the Covenant is now in the temple. It's in the dwelling place that they have made. Now, verse 22. And where did I stop? Yeah, verse 22. And Solomon stood before the altar of Yahuwah in the presence of all the congregation of Israel, and spread forth his hands toward heaven. So right here, what do we see? What do we see in verse 22 that we just read in Leviticus?
Solomon dedicated.
Yes, in the exact same way. What's his name? Aaron dedicated the temple he dedicated the tabernacle by offering the sacrifices, right? And then we see that he prayed, or he did something, and the Most High responded to their sacrifices by consuming the altar with fire. We're going to see that again. So let's skip a few, and we're going to jump down, because this is Solomon's prayer. Solomon's about to pray. Now we're going to skip down to verse 62. So 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 62 through 66. And it reads, and the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifice before Yahuwah. So it's the exact same thing that we saw that Aaron did. So after his prayer, Solomon and all the children of Israel gathered together and offered sacrifices to the Most High. Verse 63. And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto Yahweh, 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of Yahweh. Did you see it? With this sacrifice, they dedicated the house, the temple, unto the Most High. Verse 64. The same day did the king hollow the middle of the court that was before the house of Yahweh. For there he offered burnt offerings and meat offerings and the fat of peace offerings, because the brazen altar that was before Yahweh was too little to receive the burnt offerings and meat offerings and the fat of the peace offerings. That's saying something. Verse 65. And at that time, Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, a great congregation, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt, before Yahweh our Elohim. 7 days, and 7 days, even 14 days. Notice something in verse 66. On the 8th day, he sent the people away, and they blessed the king and went unto their tents joyful and glad of heart for all the goodness that Yahweh had done for David his servant and for Israel his people. Highlight verse 66 for the same reason I had you highlight the other verse earlier. If anybody wants to know who God's people are or who Elohim's people are, you see it right there, and for Israel his people. But back to the point. 14 days Solomon held this, he was giving sacrifices and celebrating. That's kind of understandable because of how much meat Solomon had sacrificed to the Most High. Where to go? In verse 63, he offered 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. That's a lot of meat. That's a lot of food for a sacrifice. And after he did that, they sacrificed, and they celebrated for 14 days under King Solomon when he offered it. So for 14 days they celebrated, but on the 8th day, he sent everybody home. So for the first 7 days, they celebrated in Solomon's house at the temple. This is where they were celebrating at the new temple near Solomon's house. And we're going to see this in John chapter 10, what they call it in John chapter 10, they call it Solomon's porch. So here they celebrated for 14 days, but on the 8th day is when Solomon sent the entire congregation of the children of Israel home to their own tents. Now y'all going home. We're going to keep partying here, but y'all go at home. Because think about it. All that meat that he sacrificed, can't let it go to waste. So they partied all of that time. And we see in verse 63, and it says, so the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of Yahweh. So this is the same thing that we saw Moses and Aaron and the children of Israel do. Now Solomon is doing it officially with a feast for the same reason. So we no longer have a mobile tabernacle, a mobile temple. Now we have a permanent structure, and we are now dedicating that to the Most High. That's the Feast of Dedication. That's the Feast of Dedication. Okay. That's the Feast of Dedication, what we see. So now we're going to jump to 1 Chronicles chapter 28 and verses 3 through 6. Now, this is, it's basically a recap, but it just gives, was that Keisha? Sounds like a Jamaican party. Yes. Yeah, I get it. You guys go all out. Y'all have parties for days. Y'all don't turn up and turn down for nothing. But yes, so we see here that this is Solomon giving that feast. Notice that Solomon did not declare it a feast. He did not make that something new. This is something that the children of Israel were doing since Moses and Aaron did it initially. 7 days, you're going to sit in this temple in the congregation, in the door of the congregation, in the tent of the congregation. And then on the 8th day, you're going to make a great sacrifice, and the Most High is going to come down and dwell with you. Solomon is just repeating that same thing, except on his, it actually says that he made it, that he had a feast. Same thing Moses and Aaron did. What did I say? First Chronicles 28. First Chronicles 28 is going to give you a little more of the backstory or what was going on at the time. So First Chronicles 28 and verses 3 through 6. So starting in verse 3. But Elohim said unto me, thou shalt not build an house for my name, because thou hast been a man of war and hast shed blood. So this is the Most High talking to David. He did not allow David to build him a temple because David was a man of war and there was too much blood on his hands. Not that the Most High was upset at that. Not that the Most High was mad at that. It's just that for this reason, he chose not to have David build the temple. So instead, he has Solomon to do it. And he's going to say it. Verse 4. Howbeit, Yahuwah Elohim of Israel chose me before all the house of my father to be king over Israel forever. For he hath chosen Judah to be the ruler, and of the house of Judah, the house of my father, and among the sons of my father, he liked me to make me king over all Israel. And of all my sons, for Yahuwah hath given me many sons, he hath chosen Solomon, my son, to sit upon the throne of the kingdom of Yahuwah over Israel. And he said unto me, Solomon thy son, he shall build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father. So this is the actual conversation between the Most High and David about Solomon coming to build the temple. So now if we go from there, let's go to 2 Chronicles chapter 6 and verses 10 through 13. Oh. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 10. And it reads, Yahuwah therefore hath performed his word that he spoken. For I am risen up in the room of David my father, and am set on the throne of Israel, as Yahuwah promised, and have built the house for the name of Yahuwah Elohim of Israel. So now we've jumped up to Solomon. Solomon he's repeating the same thing that the Most High said to his father David. And he's showing that it has now come to fruition. Verse 11, and in it have I put the ark, wherein is the covenant of Yahuwah that he made with the children of Israel. And he stood before the altar of Yahuwah in the presence of all the congregation of Israel and spread forth his hands. For Solomon had made a brazen scaffold of 5 cubits long and 5 cubits broad and 3 cubits high, and had set it in the midst of the court. And upon it he stood and kneeled down upon his knees before all the congregation of Israel and spread forth his hands toward heaven. So this is that brazen altar that was mentioned that we saw in First Kings and First Kings, that was not big enough for the sacrifice that Solomon had put forth. So we're going to go from there. Let's jump over to chapter 7. Yes, we're going to jump over to chapter 7. So 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verses 1 through 3. Now when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of Yahuwah filled the house. And the priest could not enter into the house of Yahuwah, because the glory of Yahuwah had filled Yahuwah's house. And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord came, and the glory of Yahuwah came upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshiped and praised Yahuwah, saying, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Isn't that the exact same thing that happened when Moses and Aaron dedicated the tabernacle to the Most High? The priests couldn't enter. When the Most High first came down into the place, they could not enter. They could not come in. It's the exact same thing happening right now. That's how you know that what Moses and Aaron did was them dedicating the tabernacle. It's the exact same thing. It was a feast. It was a joyous time that they were having, because now the Most High is literally living with us. So from there, let's go to, so we see it now in the Old Testament, right? That what we see in the time of Maccabees is not something new. It's something that they were doing even back then. It was something that was established back during the time of Moses and Aaron. So before we get that one, let's go to First Maccabees, chapter 2, and starting at verse 1. First Maccabees chapter 2, and we're going to do verse 1 through 14. First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1, and it reads, in those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joarib, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And he had 5 sons, Johanan called Caddis, Salmon called Tassi, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Avron, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphis. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me! Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there, when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. So you see now what the problem is. You see what the issue is that the Maccabees were experiencing, among other issues. This one, which Mattathias is speaking about at this particular time. In verse 7 again, well, he said, woe is me, wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there, when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Right? So he is upset at what he sees about the condition of his people and the condition of the sanctuary. What is the sanctuary that he's talking about? That's in Jerusalem.
The temple.
He's talking about the temple. Which temple?
Same one that was built by Solomon.
Absolutely. So he's talking about that temple. The same temple that Solomon built, that Nehemiah went to rebuild when he rebuilt the wall. That temple. So he sees this sanctuary is the temple that he sees. Verse 8. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets, her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? Verse 10 is very deep. So when we see Psalms 83 and 2, we talk about the enemies of the Most High and how they've all been confederate against the children of Israel to make sure that their name has been forgotten. They are no longer a nation of people. Maccabees is telling you right now the exact same thing. What nation have not played a part in her spoils? Everybody, every nation of people has come at this point in time, has come to the children, to the temple and to Jerusalem to do the children of Israel wrong in some form or fashion. Verse 11, all her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman, she has become a bond slave. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. So do you see in what regard the children of Israel were supposed to hold the temple, and they were supposed to hold the sanctuary? Out of everything that we've had, out of all the kingdoms, the palaces, all of that jazz, all of the fine clothes, a fine twined linen, the ephods with all the jewelry in it, and all the things that you see of the children of Israel that they had at one point. The temple, our sanctuary, he says, even our beauty and our glory. Like the temple was supposed to be the shining glory, the beacon of the children of Israel. Why? Because that's where the Most High dwelled. This was the best of the best that we had to offer. The temple was supposed to be the best of the best. This was our beauty and our glory. Verse 13, to what end therefore shall we live any longer? Do you see like how, this is how hurt he was. Just by seeing the condition of his people, the condition of our city, and the condition of our temple. He said, I don't even want to live anymore. How can we keep living like this, knowing that our temple is in this condition? And matter of fact, to show you this is not the exact precept of it, but this is an example of it. Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. The book of Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. And the reason I say this is not a precept of it, because by the time of Luke chapter 21, we're reading something in the Maccabees that has already happened. So this is not a precept of it. This is just an example of it. So Luke chapter 21 and verses 20 through 24. And it reads, "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled." Now, the funny thing is when it says that, for these be the days of vengeance, right? These be the days of vengeance. Now watch what he talks about. Verse 23, "But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." The vengeance that Yahusha is making mention of here is because what happens in the book of Maccabees. Do you think that after the children of Israel destroyed these people the way that they did, retake over their temple, rededicate the temple back to the Most High, and we lived prosperous for a while, do you think that these other nations that we cast out and that we destroyed were just going to sit by and be like, man, they got me. We just going to take the L. Ain't nothing we can do about it. Not at all. Not at all. The vengeance that he's talking about is a result of what Maccabees did. Those other nations were plotting for years and years and just waiting for the opportunity. The opportunity that they were waiting for, hold First Maccabees and grab my favorite, Judith chapter 5 and verse 20. In the Apocrypha, the book of Judith, chapter 5 and verse 20. And this is what these Gentiles were waiting on. They were waiting on that. Judith chapter 5 and verse 20. "Now therefore, my Lord and governor, if there be any error in this people, and they sin against their Elohim, let us consider that this shall be their ruin, and let us go up, and we shall overcome them." This is what they were waiting on. You want to know why they were waiting? Verse 21. "But if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord now pass by, lest their Elohim, lest their sovereign defend them, and their Elohim be for them, and we become a reproach before all the world." That's why they were waiting. Because during the time of Maccabees, they were hell-bent on keeping the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. We're going to rededicate this temple so we can get back to sacrificing, so we can get back to being the people that the Most High told us we should be, all the way back in the times of Moses and Aaron. Because I'm going to tell you something that y'all might not know. During the entire time of this Apocrypha, the Most High is not talking to anyone. He is not speaking to any of the prophets. He stops talking to the prophets in the book of Malachi, and does not begin speaking again until we get into Matthew. The Apocrypha takes place during that time period between Malachi and Matthew. So all throughout this time, they are not hearing anything from the Most High. They are just going by the lessons that they have. They have the books. They are just going by what Moses and Aaron and all the prophets have written aforetimes about the law, statutes, and commandments. That says, and that speaks volumes to their character and their determination. We don't even know if we're doing it right. We're just doing what the people before us wrote down and told us we should be doing. We have no confirmation that the Most High is with us. He's not saying anything to us. We don't have any prophets that are out here speaking on the Most High's behalf. We are just going off what they did before us. Go ahead, Ms. Melinda.
I was wondering how they got in there and got to take all those things out of the temple and how they destroyed it. If God was there, if our Elohim was there, it would never would have happened.
Absolutely. What
That's how it happened. He wasn't there.
it never would have happened if he was there. Not happening. But because the Most High was so upset and he stopped talking during the time of after Malachi, that was it. He stopped talking. The children of Israel went crazy. They just went astray doing not all of us. A large number of us did. As a matter of fact, we're going to read in some of that where they went crazy, some of the things that they were doing. We're going to read one example of what they were doing. Where did we stop? We were going through what?
We were in Judah.
We were in Luke. Did we read all
Okay,
that
before that? Okay.
through 24? Yes, we read through 24. So let's go back to Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 17. So forgive me, first Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 17. We're going to read 17 through 24. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, right? So this is after Mattathias, he's exclaiming how hurt he is about the condition of Jerusalem and about the sanctuary and about his people, right? And so when we get to verse 17, some of the king's men, Antiochus' men, are there, and they're trying to persuade Mattathias and these Israelites to follow after some of the king's laws. To see what that's talking about, hold this real quick and jump over to First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 41. Yes. So first Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. So this is what the children of Israel were doing. There were a lot of children of Israel who were doing this. They were forsaking the laws of the Most High, and they were doing all kinds of weird things and perverting the altar and perverting the temple and offering weird, strange sacrifices, like Celise was saying, by sacrificing pigs and swine and unclean animals and all kinds of, animals with blemishes that should not have been on there. They were offering them on the altar to strange gods. And so when we get to chapter 2 and verse 17. Yes, so the king's men were trying to persuade the children of Israel to continue to do that. So verse 17, then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done. Yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. So he's trying to bribe them to break the laws of the Most High. Come on, offer profane things on this altar. Come on, don't keep the laws of the Most High. Don't do that. Forsake all of that stuff. Many of your people and your brethren have already done it. Why not get in line and be counted as one of the friends of the king? So we're going to read 24. So verse 19. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments. You ever had somebody say, so you ever been in a conversation with somebody and they start off with a statement and say, with all due respect, or I don't mean no harm, but you know they about to say something sideways. You know they about to say something that's real disrespectful and something that means plenty of harm. This is exactly what Mattathias is doing right now. Similarly, we saw with Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys when Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to bow down to that idol. He said, even if, he said, our God is more than capable to deliver us from your hands. But even if he don't, we will not bow down to your idol. Sorry, not sorry. It is what it is. Same thing right here in verse 19. Mattathias is like, hey, look, with all due respect, I don't mean no harm. Verse 20. Yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. With all due respect, I hear what you're saying. Every country and every person under the king's dominion might follow and bow down to the king's rules and do exactly what he said do. But we ain't doing it. We ain't doing it. Verse 23. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. And Celeste, this is for you. This is what you were talking about. They were sacrificing pigs and swines on the altar. This is exactly what he's talking about. Verse 24, which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. This was not just anybody. This was a Jew who knew better. And he still decided to come up and place on this altar some profane meat, some weird meat, some swine or pork or whatever, some blemished or unperfect sacrifice. And Mattathias ran over there, could not contain himself, and killed him on the altar. Verse 25 is amazing. Also, the king's commissioner. Mattathias killed the Jew and the king's commissioner, who compelled men to sacrifice. He killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Mattathias wasn't to be played with. He was not to be trifled with, not one bit. So let's jump from it. Now, you can, on your own time, you can read through this and see just how the example that Mattathias was following. And matter of fact, we can get this real quick. It's right. No, that's not that. It's before that. That's right in 26, verse 26. So thus dealt he zealously for the law of Elohim, like as Phineas, or you'll hear Elder Joseph when he said, Pinchas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. Now jump over to verse, where'd it go? Verse 54. Now the story that Mattathias is making mention of is there was a man and a woman, Salom, Zambri, who was, he decided to have sex with his wife on the altar. And Pinchas, or Phineas, ran over and killed them both on the altar. He stabbed him through with a spear, and he was strong enough that he stabbed through both of them and then lifted them both up on the end of the spear. They decided that they were just going to do whatever they wanted to do. And so Pinchas wasn't playing it. In verse 54, you see a result of what Pinchas got. Pinchas, or Phineas, our father, in being zealous and fervent, obtained the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. So the Most High was proud of Phineas. He was proud of Pinchas. He said, you will be an everlasting priest unto me. All right. So let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 42 through 45. Now, chapter 3 in itself, if you're not prepared to get excited and be running around your house looking for a sword or a knife or a shield or whatever, don't read chapter 3. But chapter 3 is incredible. We're going to pick a few pieces out of it. So chapter 3, verse 42 through 45. Now when Judas and his brethren saw that miseries were multiplied and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them. So at this point, the Maccabees, him and his sons, have been going on a rampage and just literally killing and destroying all of the Gentiles in Jerusalem, getting these people out of the sanctuary, getting them out of the tabernacle, like out of the temple, and they are just going crazy. Like they are fighting everywhere. They're fighting on the Sabbath day. They're fighting just like, no, we are not having it. And they are killing just a ton of people. And so now Antiochus, of course, is upset. So he's sending armies after the Maccabees and after the children of Israel who are following along, just repeatedly over and over and over and over again. Every time they kill an army, he sends another army. Yes, Ma, I see your hand.
I just want to point out that the Maccabees are technically breaking the law because the king gave a commandment that this should all be done. And rather than obey the law of man, they are choosing to obey the law of Elohim.
Exactly. What is that? Is that First Peter? Did I say First Peter? I believe it's First Peter 4:11. We rather obey God than man. Is that First Peter 4:11? I think it is. Somebody check me on that. First Peter 4. No.
Acts 5:29.
Right. First 4:11 is it oracles of God. Sorry. Acts 5:29. That sounds better. This is, and then Peter stood. Yeah, there we go. So Acts 5:29. You're absolutely right. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. That's the mindset we should have. So all this time leading up to the Feast of Dedication, leading up to Hanukkah, we need to be focused on that. Like we rather obey Elohim than man. Like you can't make me, you can't sway me to break the laws. You can't force me to break the laws. And if you read throughout Maccabees, there are plenty of those who are called the martyrs for Elohim and the martyrs for Yahusha, who refused to break the law, statutes, and commandments, and they put their lives on the line, and some of them died. Actually, all of the martyrs died for it. They were killed in some horrific ways, but they refused to bow down and obey men, than rather obey God. They refused to break the law, statutes, and commandments. So back to First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 43. They said one to another, let us restore the decayed estate of our people, and let us fight for our people and the sanctuary. Then was the congregation gathered together that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. Again, like that speaks volumes as to where their dedications were, where their commitment was. He says they gathered all the people together that they may be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask for mercy and compassion. But they still are not hearing from the Most High. They're gathered together and they're praying. They're on one accord. He still ain't responding. But they still going forward. They're still committed to doing the law, statutes, and commandments. So that is incredible. Verse 45. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. So here we see the condition of Jerusalem. We see the condition of the sanctuary, and the people, they're done. They're done. You stick a fork in them at that time, they were done. There was nothing, that they had no zeal, they weren't willing to fight. But Maccabees and his sons came up and they roused the people up. And seriously, get a moment, whether it be today or tomorrow leading up to the Feast of Dedication, for those who are following the full moon and those who are already in it, you can still read it. Read chapter 3. Judas gives a speech. You guys have seen Gladiator, and Maximus' speech toward the end ain't got nothing on what Judas was going. Judas will get you pumped up. I do not advise you to read that and go to work, because you will definitely go in there with a chip on your shoulder. Read that when you know you're gonna be in the house for a while, because that is motivation. So let's continue on. We're gonna jump to verse 47. So First Maccabees chapter 3, verse 47. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes. Now, pay attention to this. And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. They brought also the priest's garments and the first fruits and the tithes and the Nazarites they stirred up, who had accomplished their days. Do you see what's going on here? The Most High is not responding to them, but they're praying all on one accord. Then they fasted all on one accord. And then they opened the book of the law. They are just following the steps and the guidelines that Moses and Aaron and all of the prophets before them have laid down. Like I said, they don't know if they're being successful. They don't know if the Most High is pleased. All they know is that this is what they did, and damn it, that's what I'm going to do. Period. If it was good enough, and I think Eliyahu said this, if it was good enough for Yahusha, it's good enough for me. Maccabees, they aren't even saying that. They say if it was good enough for Moses, it's good enough for me. If it's good enough for Zechariah, for any of them, for Zephaniah, if it's good enough for Amos, if they did it, I'm doing it. Even if I don't hear from the Most High. Just like with Daniel and the three Hebrew boys said, even if he don't deliver us from your hands, dude, he's already done too much. He's done more than enough. So I don't care what you do. This is that mindset that they were in. We're going to fight for our people, for our country, for Jerusalem, for our temple and our sanctuary. Dude, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you do. I'm willing to die for this. I can no longer live seeing my people in this estate. I can no longer live and just stand by and watch. Ask yourself, honestly, have you gotten to that point where you can no longer stand to watch your people in this decayed estate and just sit by and be like, well, I know the truth. Have you gotten to that point where you're like, dude, it pains me to see you in this condition. It pains me to see those bastards over there in my land, in my temple, perverted, like not in the temple, they don't have it no more, but in my land, parading around to be me. It pains me to see that. So much so that I'm willing to lay my life on the line to keep these laws, statutes, and commandments. I don't care what it looks like to anybody else. I don't care if they cast me out. I don't care if they ostracize me. I don't care if I look funny, if I look strange, if you don't agree with what I'm doing. It does not bother me. The Most High is pleased with it. He may not say nothing, but I know Moses, and I know Aaron, and I know Solomon and David and all them people who came down before me. I know they kept these laws, and if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me. I see your hand. Go ahead.
I don't mean to stop you when you're on a roll like that, but what I get from all of this is that the king who had already captured them, they were already captive, who could have killed them. He really could have. He could have just killed all the Israelites, but he knew that rather than kill the body, if he really wanted to harm them, the best thing for him to do was take away their God and the remembrance of their God, that he would do more harm to them by removing what they believed in than he would by just killing their bodies. That's what I'm getting for that. And that's some powerful stuff right there.
That, all praises to the Most High. That is exactly what happened then, and it's what's happening now.
But as long as they was keeping those statutes and commandments and laws, the king couldn't do nothing with them anyway, because they were protected.
We read that in Judith. We read that in the book of Judith. That's why I went and got that. They had no proof that what they were doing was right. They had no confirmation that the Most High was pleased with them. Remember, he stopped speaking. He stopped talking. This is what we call the Dark Ages. The Most High stopped talking to the children of Israel. But they were still, I'm keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. I don't care. I don't care. I'm keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. You cannot remove me from that. And they were still doing, they were still keeping it. We're in that predicament right now where the majority of us don't know who we are. They don't know who our Elohim is. They don't know that we're supposed to be keeping these laws, statutes, and commandments. And when you tell them, they be like, what? I ain't doing that. I'm gonna go. Easter is coming up. We're gonna celebrate Easter. Christmas is coming up. Jesus was born in a manger on December 25th. We're gonna celebrate that. What? Do you know what it feels like in December in Jerusalem? Are you kidding me? We're gonna keep doing. We're gonna do Thanksgiving. We're gonna do all these things. We're going shopping on the Sabbath. They don't care about none of that. And the fact is, that's what Psalms 83:2 is about. If I can get you to forget who you are, that's why it says to remove the name of the children of Israel from existence. Let them forget their name. You forget your name, you don't know who you are. You don't know what you're connected to, meaning who you're connected to, our Elohim. You forget all of that. If you don't know who you're connected to and what you're connected to, you won't keep the feast days, you won't keep the commandments, you won't do none of that. You just out here like everybody else. You will be a friend of the king. That's what they're trying. This is what that king, what that messenger was trying to get to Mattathias and them. Be a friend of the king like everybody else. That's why the scripture says in the book of John, where it says to be friends with the world is enmity with Elohim. Because if you're friends with them, you're doing everything contrary to the Most High. And what happens when we're going contrary to the Most High? Hosea 5:15. He does this. Calamity, life is tearing you up back here. And he's laughing at it. He says, I laugh at your calamity. They back there going crazy. And he just like, huh? You wasn't, you, wow. Paying you no attention. But yeah, and still we sit up, oh, God is blessing me. He got me a new car, got me a new house, got me a new job. That ain't God. He ain't thinking about you. He not listening to you. In your worst moments, you crying and going crazy. Oh, my daughter got COVID. We got to go to the hospital. We've been in here for 5 hours. God, please, can y'all pray for me? You all on Facebook and social media. Can you pray for me? My daughter's in the hospital. Meanwhile, God, like, you praying for her ain't gonna do no good. I'm not listening. Ain't no point you praying to me. The scripture says that any man not keeping the law, statutes, commandments, even his prayer is an abomination. I'm not listening to that. That's garbage. I hate the fact that you know how to pray. So praying for that, I ain't listening. Anyway, Ms. Blunt, you was about to say something. You raised your hand.
Yeah, I was gonna say that even after we tell these folks, I mean, I had a discussion last night, and I was telling the folks about, what we do on the Sabbath. We don't shop, we don't cook and things like that. They listen wholeheartedly, and they, yeah, and da. And next thing you know, here I am by myself this morning, and they all gone shopping. What's that part about the Bible says about their hearts is seared with iron?
Their conscience is seared with a hot iron?
That, yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Their conscience is seared with a hot iron. Yeah. And also to go along with that, it says, my people draw near me with their lips, and with their mouths they do honor me, but their hearts are far from me. You will go to church and yell and scream, oh, hallelujah, praise, all praises to God, cry, I love Jesus, I love God. Yeah, you do all of that. You get up, shout, cry, run around the sanctuary, snot out the nose, all of that until you pass out on the floor. They put a little blanket on you, somebody fanning you. She okay, she's slain in the spirit. That brother's slain in the spirit. Yeah, all right, you can do all of that. But God, like, your heart is far from me. Your mind is not on me. You got your reward. Yeah, you done ran yourself tired. You done burned a few calories. You crying, now you laying out the floor, take a nap. That's your reward. You ain't paying me no attention. I'm not paying you any attention. Anyway, I done told y'all, don't read First Maccabees chapter 3 if you ain't ready to be amped up. I made the mistake and I read through it. Verse 51. So First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 51. Excuse me. For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profane, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. And lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us, thou knowest. So what we see in 51 is that the priests, they are heavy, they are burdened, they are distraught, they are depressed, for lack of a better word, because they cannot serve in their office. That's really deep. simply because they are not allowed to serve and to serve the Most High, to perform the sacrifices and the offerings like they were trained to do, that they were born to do, literally, because as a Levite, you are born into priesthood. So the very thing that they are born to do, they cannot do. And the fact that they can't do it, they are depressed. They are destroyed. Yo, I want that mindset and that kind of heart toward the Most High, that if I cannot do the law, statutes, and commandments, if I cannot do the service of the Most High, that it makes me sad and depressed and I'm downtrodden. Dude, the priest and the priests are in heaviness and brought low because they can't do it, because they can't operate in the temple, because they can't do what they do, and because they see the condition of the people and the condition of the city and the condition of the temple. They are depressed. That's incredible. So let's jump to chapter 4, and we're going to read verse 40. And here is the Maccabees and the children of Israel at this time dedicating, or shall we say, rededicating the temple. They're going, this is awesome. First Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 40. This is going to be 40 through 59. And it reads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest there should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down. So, Celeste, that's the point. That's what you were talking about. The heathen had defiled it by burning all those unclean things on the offering, on the altar, and doing all kinds of things. So they pulled it down. The Maccabees did. They pulled it down. They broke it. This is not going to work for us. We can't sacrifice on an altar that has previously been profaned. That don't work. Verse 46. And laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. See right there, there is no prophet around at this time. And we know that the prophets only speak the Most High's words. So if there's no prophet around, he's not speaking. So verse 47, then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hollowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels. And into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success. Remember I said earlier that when it said that they fell upon their faces back in Leviticus, that just means that they worship and pray and praise the Most High. Verse 56, and so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. So that was how when you get to the book of Maccabees, this was them setting it up so that we should do it forever, even though this was something that we saw Solomon do, and we saw Moses and Aaron and the children of Israel do the same thing. Here, Judas Maccabees and the rest of the children of Israel declared that we're definitely going to keep doing this from now on. Now, remember I said that this happens, and we should all know this, that the book, that the Apocrypha is in between Malachi and Matthew. So let's turn to the book of John, chapter 10, and verse 22. Matter of fact, before we get there, remember the scripture we read in Luke chapter 21 and verse 20 through 24, and it's talking about how when Yahushua was prophesying about the days of vengeance were coming. Let's go back to First Maccabees chapter 5 and verse 1. And this is hilarious. Now, when the nations round about heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much. Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them, and thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people. So you see, these other nations that were around Jerusalem at the time, it pissed them off that we rebuilt the temple, that we rebuilt the sanctuary, and that we rededicated it and got things going back the way it was supposed to be. It pissed them off that we were doing it. So that vengeance that they had, that Hamashiach was prophesying about in Luke 21, they had it ever since the very moment that they heard that we rebuilt the temple. They started planning and plotting. So let's go to John chapter 10, verse 22. And it reads, and it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication. The dedication of what? The temple. So remember, it was the Maccabees who rebuilt it and put everything back together and set Jerusalem the way it was supposed to be. So when we get to John, this is that temple that was rebuilt by them. So it says, and it was winter, and Yahushua walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. So this is what I was talking about when I mentioned earlier, when I said that the temple was Solomon's house. It was called it was Solomon's porch. So this is the Feast of Dedication. It's a time where we rededicate, where we celebrate the rededication of the temple, right? We celebrate both the dedication and the rededication of the temple, because what the Maccabees were doing was celebrating what they saw Solomon and Moses and Aaron celebrate at that time. They were celebrating the dedication of the tabernacle during Moses and Aaron time, and then the dedication of the temple in Solomon's time. So when they brought it back and they re-put it back together, they just continued on the celebration of the temple. Now, the funny thing is, and Eliyahu and Elder Yaakov, I know you guys can do it, check me on this, but I believe during the time when Solomon did it, wasn't it in the 7th month? Thank you.
Yes. It was the 7th month that Solomon dedicated, that they celebrated. We read it today. That was for 1 Kings 8, I think.
Yeah, it's in there. It's in there. 1 Kings 8. Or is it 9? No, what is it? Or is it Chronicles?
It might have been Chronicles. Hold on. No,
First
it's
Kings 8 and 2.
8 and 2, right?
Thank you. Thank you. Hold on. Yes. Anthony was in the, yes. There was actually another one where, what was I reading? Oh wait, was that in Nehemiah? When it talks about in this, So yes, this is right. This is correct. So it was in the 7th month, but I believe in Nehemiah's time when you're talking about, yeah, it was in Nehemiah. In Nehemiah, he mentions it. He says that the children of Israel opened the book, and Ezra began to read and to explain to them about. So they celebrated when Nehemiah was done. They celebrated on the Feast of Trumpets on the 7th month of the first day, and on the second day is when Ezra began to speak. Ezra began to teach them about tabernacles.
Right, correct. That's Nehemiah, I think 8.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. That was a bit of a sidetrack. But in Nehemiah chapter 8, yes, they began to they were celebrating the celebration when they worked because they was putting together the temple. They were trying to rebuild the wall. But in Nehemiah 8, they go in and it describes the feasts that are coming up. Like I said, the Feast of Trumpets and then the Feast of Tabernacles. So the difference between the Maccabees and during the time of Solomon, they were doing it in the 7th month. And so, yeah, the Maccabees began to do it in the 9th month. So it's the same feast, but the times were different. Now, in regards to Celeste, what you were talking about, the oil when they were burning the candle, and there was enough oil for 8 days when they only thought they had enough for one. I personally, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe Eliyahu or somebody else knows exactly what that's in reference to, because I remember, I believe it was Elijah when he gave the widow and her son with the oil. She poured enough oil that filled up every pot and pan in her house. But then the one about the oil for the light, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that happened historically.
Where was it? Was that in First Maccabees?
Um,
Or was it during the Feast of Dedication?
Honestly, can't remember at the moment. But that is where in the book of John, Hanukkah gets, let me see. That is where Hanukkah gets its other name, Festival of Lights, from.
Feast of Lights, I've heard that.
I think it might be something in the Talmud, because I tried to do a little research before the study, and I think it was like a Talmudic thing.
Yep. So according to Wikipedia, you can take that however serious you want. The miracle of the cruse of oil, or the miracle of Hanukkah, is an Agadah depicted in the Babylonian Talmud as one of the reasons for Hanukkah. In the story, the miracle occurred after the liberation of the temple in Jerusalem during the Maccabean revolt, and it describes the finding of a jug of pure oil that was to be enough to light the lamp for 1 day, but that lasted for 8 days. So that is in the Babylonian Talmud. I don't recall a reference to that in the scripture, but I don't know everything. So please, if you can correct me on that, please do.
But it said it was in the Maccabees, so we know it's in the Maccabees somewhere.
They just said during the time of the Maccabean revolt. So not in the book of Maccabees, because here it is. We just read through that. We read through 59.
All right. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And I might mess this up a little bit, but I believe that account is, so, you can take it for what it is. but the Ethiopian Bible has the third book of Maccabees and the fourth book of Maccabees.
Okay.
And I believe that's where the story actually is during the Maccabean revolt time.
Okay. So that would make sense, because I do know that there is a third and fourth book of Maccabees. So you're absolutely right. It could be in there. But yeah, so that is, you know, that is one of the miracles that is reported to have happened, and it's 8 or 7. It's 8 days. Okay, wait a minute, Keisha. Let me read your whole comment. Okay, so the menorah, here we go. The menorah that we see when it talks about it in the scriptures, when we talk about in the candlestick, it's supposed to have 7 branches, right? You see, it says 6 branches. The branches, aside from this central stalk, these would be the branches, the 6 that come out from that central stalk. So there's 6 branches that come out, and then the 7th one is in the middle. So it's 7 branch menorah. The 8 and the 9, that's, I don't know where they get that from. But we read that in the book of Exodus when he talks about how they built the candlestick with its knops and its branches. And it talks about the 6. It's talking about I believe, let me stop stuttering. Let me just find it.
I know what you're talking about, Kelly. I was just trying to make sure, because way I read it, I got the 7 because of the branches going out. But I wanted to, well, the feast days in correlation to the menorah. Is it based on the scripture we just read, or is it based on the lighting of the menorah, which is 7 days? Because I know the 8th day they did the sacrifice and all of that.
So it's actually 8 days. So you start from the 25th day, and then there are 7 days after that. So the first day is not, when it says it starts on the 25th day, and it continues on for 7 days. So you got the first day, which is the 25th, and then the 26th, 27th, 28th, 30th, and then the 3 days after that, right? So it's 8 days. That's why we read in Exodus, it says on the 8th day they did a sacrifice. That was them finishing the Feast of Dedication. That was the last day. And what was I about to? There was one I was about to get. Yes. So to show you about the menorah having 7 candlesticks, just for clarification, it's Revelation 1 and verse 13. This is one of the easiest. Revelation 1 and verse 13 says, "And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle." And that candlesticks is the lampstands. What is that? Oh, I was like, what? Where is it? 13. Yeah, that's the lampstand. That's talking about the menorah. It's talking about how Hamashiach was standing in this vision that John the Revelator saw. Hamashiach was standing in the midst of a menorah, a big one, actually. And the 7 candlesticks are the menorah. That's what it's talking about, the 7 branches. Now, as far as the days, we see that during the Maccabean time, they kept it for 8 days. So on the first day you start, then there's, like I said, 7 more days after that. So in total, it's 8 days. And now I could be wrong about this, but in my house, what we do is we light all 8 candles every day. You don't do 1 per day. What we don't do 1 per day. We light the entire candlestick. All 8 we light from the first day, and we blow it out at night, and then all the way to the 8th day. So we light all 8 candles. So it's not okay. So it's not one day for, I mean, it's not one candle for a day. So you don't go by the days of the week that count. You just do 8 days, period. And then every day you just light the whole menorah. So are there any other questions? I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.